Good afternoon. My name is Miss MJ Nam, and I'm the proud principal of Fultonvale Elementary Junior High School. Fultonvale is a school that is comprised of approximately 450 students from kindergarten to grade 9, and we're just outside of Sherwood Park. So this afternoon, I've been asked to present a webinar about supporting every student, and I'm here to talk to you about restorative practices and how we have developed that here at Fultonvale School. So with that, our school has approximately 30 school teachers and staff and approximately 40 staff members. So how did we start our journey? And it was a journey that was very collaborative with our parent council and our students. As a school principal, I was feeling like there was a lot of conflict amongst students and staff and with parents for the reasons for why we were suspending students or asking students to go to study hall, those kinds of things. So, you know, as an educator, I sat back and I observed these interactions and this relationship. It's not the reason why any of us teachers get into this profession. Conflict is not why we are here, but we soon started to see, our parent group started to see that we needed a different answer to that. So we got into this idea of how do we give our students a voice? And the way that we did that was through restorative practice. So we started by training our teachers and our staff. And we started with some very basic ideas of what types of questions we would ask. We started in the office. And those kinds of questions were things like asking what happened. Instead of trying to figure out and being the policewoman and trying to figure out and investigating all of the situations and trying to lay blame, because there is not any blame. We found that it was more a situation of what are the relationships between two students. So that's where we started, and then we started using the same common language as we went forward with our parents and our students and our staff. So in saying that, what had happened was the students felt more empowered. They felt like they had a voice. They felt actually like they were listened to. So we started slowly with sharing circles. Our elementary teachers are excellent because they have the kids all day. And our junior high teachers wanted to get in on that also. So what they started to do too is sharing circles every Monday morning, period 1. Either the teacher would create the question, student would create a question, or actually I would send out some questions to the staff about what they could talk about. Using the talking stick, it gave the kids a real focus. It made our kids become better listeners also, so that they could hear and really understand what the other perspective was. So that's the way that we started off our journey. You know, it felt like everybody was much more included. Everyone was in the circle. We started to do it at staff meetings. Yes, the adults felt uncomfortable doing that at the very beginning, but you get a more open response and a more truthful response as we went forward. So, why use those practices? Again, I found as a principal that the same kids were in my office. You know, you'd have a talk with them, you would wag your finger at them, you would really discourage the types of behaviors that they were demonstrating. But then I'd find that the same kids were back in a few weeks with the same sort of conflicts, be it with the adult or be it with their peer. So I wanted to get out of that whole adversarial, judgmental, black and white kind of concept. So restorative practices are interactive and proactive. When we started to have these conversations with kids and asking them what happened, we started to do those circles within the office area. So I would, instead of me telling the student how they hurt somebody else or how they harmed or another student, we would do it as a group of people. And we would support the people that were hurt or harmed, and we would also support the person that lots of times the kids called the bully. And the way that we would do that is that they would talk directly to each other. And it was very interesting to see how kids responded to other kids when they were told, hey, you know, this really hurts my feelings when you're doing things like this. So that was a huge breakthrough for not just our staff, but it was also for the kids too, because they don't always believe the adults. And when they hear it from a peer, that sometimes is much more powerful than hearing it from an adult. So also, as adults that care for students and children, we were able to monitor our students' feelings much more. We were able to understand the conflicts that they had, not just with their schoolwork, but also with each other, because that to students is the most important thing when you are growing up. The other portion of that is that blame is not automatically given. That was one of the areas that I found as being a school administrator, that, you know, because everybody's rushing around and doing all the things they do, at times people can be quick to blame, and this process helps you step back as a teacher, as an administrator, as a parent, to step back and take that breath and ask the questions and be able to hear all of those answers. So how did we start? As I mentioned before, we started in the office. We started with the small circles. We also started with common language. Our cross-grade curricular assemblies, so kindergarten to grade 9, we would have all the students in the gym. We would separate the kids just based on small colored tickets, and as they entered in, we would give them a color ticket and they would go to those different circles. And we would have a talking stick of some sort, and as we were studying our character education virtues, we'd have a small cartoon clip, and then we would have the kids share their thoughts and feelings on those ideas. So every month we would do those cross-curricular sort of assemblies. Our discipline referrals went down drastically because the teachers felt like they had an ability to help students resolve conflict. But again, with the sharing circles, I want to say that if you go directly to the sharing or to the circle just for conflicts, the kids will know that it's a punishment. So one of the areas that we really worked on was to be proactive and do the sharing circles just even based on how is your weekend, and to really talk about the positive things around that. The circles also helped kids take responsibility for their actions and not focus on as much what the other kids were doing. So we really found that to be a powerful tool. Our successes with this restorative practice, there are so many that, you know, I can't cover them all in this session, but probably one of the areas that was the, I guess, most impressive piece where kids were able to really show emotion and be able and feel comfortable about it was around when one of our parents, a father, passed away over the holidays. This was a dad that was involved with 85–90% of our students here. He coached football outside of in the community, but all the kids knew him, and you know, he went on all the ski trips and had many children in the school at this time. So when we had to speak to the students about that, because we did have to give them some information because their friends were not here, and how do you handle that situation when the friends come back? The kids naturally circled up That's what they naturally did, because I as a principal gave the teachers a script, and they were able to, because it was very emotional for teachers also in knowing this parent, and they were able to share that information with students, and then students were able to have a voice and express themselves afterwards. So just with that situation, it was extremely, extremely valuable. Other situations that are very, very successful is the whole repairing of relationships with students. And you see it as students develop from kindergarten to grade 9. There's a lot of friendship issues where kids are best friends forever one day, and then the next day they're not. And they've hurt each other, and how do they repair that relationship? And the biggest piece around the successes that I see within our community is the ability for students to forgive and to understand that other people can make mistakes and other people can harm or unintentionally harm you, but the ability to forgive others, that's one of the biggest successes that I've seen. The creation of this environment of restorative practices means also that students and families and parents feel that we're in it together. And it's not just about my child, or it's not just about myself. It's also about how we can help all of our kids grow up. And that saying of "it takes a village" is very, very much here at Fultonvale because of the restorative practice. The other success I do want to just mention is around how our parent community has embraced this and has worked with us and collaborated with us. They've run training sessions also for parents, and we've had a good turnout with that. And every year we run with the Parent Council training on that. So very successful that way. Our challenges. There's always challenges to when we're dealing with people, because there is no magic bullet. There's no, this is the way that you deal with every situation. And because of that, every situation is different. So it does take the time that you have to put into it. You have to ask the right questions, ask those questions of the kids. How did it happen? How did it make you feel? How did it harm the other person? And how can we make it right? How can we move forward in making it right? And in taking that time to listen, there's also that time that you need to follow up. So when I have students that have had a misunderstanding or a conflict, we do have to follow up with those students to see how their relationship is going in a week or in 2 weeks or in a month or so. So that's the great part about this particular practice, is that you're constantly engaged, and the kids have to be constantly engaged in how they treat each other and relationships. Other challenges, yes, it does come down to students, adults need to be accountable and take responsibility. In order for this practice to work, is that every individual that comes to that circle needs to be able to say that, yes, this is my part in this. I did not help the situation because I did this, or I did help the situation because I did this. So they do need to take responsibility. So yes, there have been times, though, that I have had students, grade 8 girls in particular, sometimes, and I'm just going to use that as an example, that they cannot take responsibility at that time. So if that situation does arise, yes, then we do go back to the punishment model of suspension, because people need to be willing to be a part of this process. So again, that can be a challenge, as the public and parents sometimes can want that pound of flesh still, but it's through a lot of conversation and the way that we deal with students growing up that we want them to be able to deal with conflict. Because conflict is not bad. conflict is only bad if you react the same way to that conflict. So we talk about relationships and that we're family here at Fultonvale, that just like in their family, they can't get rid of their brother or sister, that we have to work with each other here. So those have been some of the challenges. And again, the challenges that come with continuing to train staff as new staff come on. But we've been very successful with that portion of it too. So because it is a philosophy on how you deal with conflict. Some of the practices that we've implemented as a school, okay, and as I mentioned before, sharing circles, assemblies with circles, assemblies in the circle format, staff meetings in circles, okay, with our restorative practice sheets. So as an example of if a student needs time to cool off, because very rarely now do we have students that are sent to the office by the teacher, because we really try to work hard at a community of learners within the classroom, that the message sometimes can be if a student is removed and sent to the office is that somebody else is going to deal with that problem. Most of the time what happens is when kids come down to the office now is that they need a cooling off period, or they need a quiet space, or they need some time to think. So that is when the students fill out a restorative practice sheet. So they just write about what happened, and how it makes them feel, and how do they feel now, and what could they do differently. So four very simple questions. We've also changed our language, like I said, to an interaction schedule instead of a supervision schedule. I've really tried to focus with our staff that sometimes the only interaction a child will have at school is a negative one and a corrective one from a teacher. So what we really try to work on is being interactive with the kids and having, at least 4 positive things to say before we have to correct. We do correct our students if there's a behavior that is not safe, but we really try to have some positive interaction with those students during their school day. Our work with First Nation, Métis, Inuit has also, of course, blended in with our sharing circles and our different teachings. The 7 teachings that we're working on this year is our character education. Again, also our active supervision at recess and interaction at recess. So, much of the training, and to give a small example, is with educational assistants and teachers and parents that are supervising out there. The game of soccer. You'll see a bunch of boys playing soccer out there, and they're not passing the ball to each other. They're really just trying to run through everybody. The effect that you can have as an adult just by walking by that game and saying, "Great passing, boys." What ends up happening if you say that is that the kids will start passing. So we really try to focus on that positive piece. Again, also the circles deal with where the kid's perception starts. It may not be our adult reality, but it is the student's reality. So we have to find that first, and that's where the circles also help with that. Our next piece is, of course, where do we go from here? Where is the evolution from where we have started from? So our process, we are approximately 3 to 4 years into our process here, and I've been fortunate to be able to be a part of this process. Our story continues. Okay? We don't have, again, a cookie-cutter answer to all situations, but you can never go wrong by listening first. And that's where this process really helps kids feel like they belong, they have a sense of belonging, that they have a voice, and that they can actually let go of some of their anxiety. Because kids, like adults, can be anxious around who's going to correct me next, or who's going to point out that I've done, or I'm doing this or this or this when they come to school. So we really, again, try not to look at those areas and be more proactive on the positive front. So our story continues, and what we continue to do is we just continue to practice practice and practice some more with our circles and with listening to students. Thank you.